I just can't let you go. Lord knows that I've tried to. You said I was the only.
Hey everyone, welcome back. The last time I discussed the upcoming focus changes, we looked at it through the point of view of an Eidolon hunter, both new and as a veteran. This shed light on what impact it will have on hunting, and I established my stance that I overall consider it a beneficial change, albeit with room for improvement, and I accept that it has given up the movement tech we have spent so much time working on, in exchange making Eidolons more accessible to players while promoting more teamwork. If you haven't seen that video yet and want clear explanations on why this focus rework will not kill off Eidolon hunting, you can check that out at the top right. Today's video is looking at changes made to the 5 focus schools based on what we currently know and possible interactions and synergies moving forward, as well as my thoughts on the balancing. Keep in mind, what was shown during the dev stream is dev shop content, meaning it is subject to change. Additionally, the actual numbers for nodes are subject to change as well, so most of the time we will be looking at top level theory craft today instead of detailed contextual synergies you normally see in my videos. Let's look at the general changes to Focus 3.0 first. These you probably already know since my video on this topic has not been particularly timely. Briefly, Void Dash is being replaced by Void Sling. Double jumping when not in Void mode will result in a Void Sling being thrown out and then traveled to. Holding down the double jump extends the sling out to maximum range, at which point you will automatically sling towards it. Tapping the double jump will make the sling, and thus you traverse the shortest distance. You can also sling the traditional way, where being in void mode and holding dash will set up the sling immediately, letting you tap or hold to sling while invisible. This second method will feel very similar to our current void dash system, albeit slightly slower, and a hold to extend mechanic for the sling to reach maximum distance. You will still be able to do maneuvers, such as air sliding with operator to reposition as necessary if you want to. You will no longer be able to dash sideways or backwards though. The other big change is Void Blast is being removed, because all focus schools are gaining 2 abilities for the 1 and 2 slots on the operator. Void Blast will be replaced by one of these slots where appropriate on their respective schools, and then Void Blast reliant skills from the past, like say Unairu Wisp, will now instead be triggered by using the school specific abilities instead, such as Unairu's Caustic Blast, triggered by pressing 2. You can early dead it by pressing 2 again, but it explodes in an 8-meter radius, stripping 75% armor. In the dev shop, this node has been renamed to Sundering Dissipation. This essentially combines our old Sundering Dash with Void Blast into a single ability. In exchange, the melee key on the operator will now instantly pull your Warframe to your position and perform a melee attack. You can also trigger finisher prompts as operator now, which will instantly pull your Warframe to the enemy and transfer back to automatically execute. For stuff like disruption, this is actually handy because now you should be able to instantly armor strip with Vast Lock by pressing melee, instead of having to go back to frame and then pressing melee. There are pros and cons, but it's too early to tell. I'm leaning more towards this being a pro. Finally, Transference is now going to be client-authoritative, meaning no more ping lag delay on Transference. Remember how swapping weapons used to be host-authoritative a couple years ago and you had to wait a decent amount of time to pull your other weapon out? The same thing is coming for operators now. Transference will be instant for everyone, you will no longer have to wait, and it should help immensely with using the operator as a survivability, crowd control, and a buffing tool alongside mobility seamlessly in your gameplay. Now let's look at those schools. I'll be looking at them in the same order as listed in the dev shop to keep things simple. Keep in mind, nodes will no longer be able to be deactivated, and the pool system is gone, being refunded as Radiant Eidolon shards. Madurai is up first. The waybounds remain unchanged. These give increased amp energy max and increased amp energy regen. Void Radiance seems to be gone, but that was a useless blind ability to start with that burns a lot of operator energy and isn't worth it. Void Strike has been changed to a 8-second uptime, 40-second downtime operator ability that multiplies your damage by up to 1000% scaling. You get 10% more damage per operator percent energy drained. It currently drains everything present in your bar upon cast, so if you only have half a bar, it will burn it all and give you only 500% damage scaling. We don't know if this is a final damage or base damage buff yet, as base damage has diminishing returns since it will compete with weapon arcanes and base damage mods as well as gun CO. For weapons, it's mostly a free massive buff since our only source of base damage anyways is Unairu Wisps, which won't be meta in Eidolon hunts moving forwards. Void Fuel is the extension of this node branch and grants 40% ammo efficiency to both your frame and operator while Void Strike is active. Combining this with energized munitions should give you 100% ammo efficiency for at least 8 seconds. This is going to become the perfect school for disruption if you don't need Vazarin or energy economy maintenance, since this completely removes the need to reload and gives a massive DPS buff when facing dem lists. The biggest effect will be found on reload heavy weapons with very short burst windows normally. Imagine how many times you could dump a 100% ammo efficiency Tigris double click into the dem list in 8 seconds when built for viral on full strip. Honestly, I do feel the Void Fuel and Void Strike is slightly overtuned in damage multipliers and will essentially make anything tanky in the game feel paper easy with a 100% ammo efficiency and 10 times damage multiplier to shoot with impunity. Obviously, it will work in Eidolons too, as discussed in the previous video. Phoenix Talons gives 25% more total IPS damage, not base damage, IPS damage. This is mostly a useless node. Phoenix Spirit, which adds 30% total elemental damage split across all elementals equipped, doesn't seem to be returning. These are both very minor min-max things, so we won't miss it too much. It really only has a tiny role in world record attempts. On the other hand, Phoenix Talents will now also increase all operator damage in general by 30%. It didn't before. This sounds to be a separate multiplicative buff, so it will come in handy. Power Transfer is basically built-in natural talent that lasts 20 seconds every time you transference, and plus 100% crit damage to all amps. I don't know if this crit damage is total crit damage or modded crit damage though. Regardless, 100 total crit damage would obviously be better, and probably one of the best nodes in the game after changes. A built-in natural talent? Yes please. This is probably one of the most underrated ones out there. Stacking this with the mod is essentially primed natural talent, and if you don't stack it, well, you just saved 1 mod slot on your Warframe. Watch out for this, it's a lot stronger than you think. Chained Sling makes all slings after the first in a short period only cost half energy. This is essentially a poor man's version of old Naramon that we now have with a giga energy regen rate on dashing and hitting enemies. Sling Strength gives 40% more frame strength after Sling for 20 seconds. This is like a massively buffed growing power. Essentially, Naramon's dash with a growing power bonus. Your 2 that replace Void Blast on Madurai now spawns a contamination wave that radiates out for 2 seconds. Enemies hit make them 25% more vulnerable to operator damage for 20 seconds. This is generally useless outside of operator speedruns or niche operator level caps, because it appears to be a debuff. We don't know if it will work on Eidolons, as Eidolons tend to ignore all ability-based debuffs. The ability Void Blast also has a successor node called Distilled Contamination. Killing enemies hit by Contamination Wave will make everything around that was hit gain a further 25% damage vulnerability to operators, and extends the status duration by 10 seconds. You can stack it up to 3 times. I also failed to see how this one will be used, since the only enemies you can reliably kill without a ton of setup are trash mobs. And I presume this is useless against Eidolons due to debuff immunity and not really having anything to kill around anyways. For regular play, this is completely unnecessary, so it's left in a weird spot. Do note that this is an operator node, as it says here, meaning it does not provide a general debuff for your Warframe weapons as well. Honestly, I would have preferred it to be universal to both, because then would actually promote a lot of operator play regardless, since a free damage vulnerability ability on a frame but requires operator would be pretty useful. Flame and Rising Blasts that either deal fireballs or Mega Void Blast yeets are disappearing with the changes. We're also losing Blazing and Meteoric Dash. I'm honestly a little bit mixed about this one, but I guess since we don't need to hide in Void mode to charge Void Strike anymore, its main uses to deal damage while you're in Void are no longer needed. Honestly, I feel Madurai is somewhat overtuned even with built-in natural talent and letting you easily hit 100% ammo efficiency. Yes, there's a hefty timer, but the only enemies in the game that pose a threat and could use this don't spawn every 40 seconds. I would have personally halved Void Strike buffs, but that's just me. I feel Madurai is probably the strongest one of them all by a long shot and gives you innate natural talent, a massive power boost, 10 times damage scaling for 8 seconds, viable 100% ammo efficiency builds without conditions or setup, and big dash spam like Naramon currently allows. It's like an endless string of damage and performance buffs that I don't really see why you pick another school for normal play. Unairu will be our second one. There are some really big changes here. Majority of the tree has been replaced or altered significantly. including the waybounds. If you do not need more damage, read Brahmanzar spam, then Unairu will probably be your school of choice since Transference in general will give both Operator and Warframes 40 seconds immunity to slow, staggers, and knockdowns. So Madurai for any content that matters and wants DPS scaling, Unairu for any brain dead shoot the floor content. The Stone Skin passive now applies to Warframes 2 for 200 more armor. Cool, but that's it. Let's look at Reinforced Return and Static Purge. Remember how when your Operator gets pulled back to frame because the frame hit 2 HP? Or your Operator died? Yeah, normally that removes all shield, and depending on Transference static stacks, a certain amount of HP is lost, and you can easily die because you don't have shields. Well, this Unairu school does the exact opposite of that. Not only will you not have to worry about Transference static anymore from Static Purge removing it, but your frame is actually invulnerable for 4 seconds after being pulled back. There are 2 ways to get pulled back to frame currently. One is your Operator getting shot and reading 0 HP. The other way is your frame reaching 2 HP if it isn't invulnerable due to an active ability while you're in Transference. We don't know if this second type of Operator death will trigger Reinforced Return, but if it does, it means it's literally impossible for your frame to die while you're an Operator now, since even if your frame hits 2 HP and get pulled back, you will get 4 seconds of iframes. You can also press X to drag the frame over to your Operator's position as the dying animation happens. This particular interaction is probably one of the reasons Transference is being made client authoritative instead of host authoritative, as I don't see how I could reliably use this node otherwise. It also saves a ton of time from not having your frame sent back several tiles if you were speed dashing to an objective or reviving a teammate before their bleed out. The best use I see for this? Level cap. If you don't need the extra damage in Madurai and are confident in your shield gating playstyle, Unairu will be extremely strong for this since it bundles together innate Prime Sure-Footed, where Transference is already super important anyways in level cap and will proc it naturally, and in theory, never die from being pulled back to frame. At cap, a frame will get killed as Operator if it isn't invulnerable because enemy damage is in the hundreds of millions without timing a perfect rolling guard when you get pulled. Currently, you will probably die when you get sent back since your frame is already being shot at as you're an Operator. This is actually pretty cool, because it means there are uses for all of Unairu, Madurai, Vazarin's Protective Dash staying in Focus 3.0, and Zenurik Energy Dash even in Endurance scenarios. As I mentioned at the start of the video, Caustic Strike, or Sundering Dissipation as it's known in the dev shop, is Unairu's Void Blast merged with Sundering Dash into a single ability. It shoots a bomb that you can detonate by pressing 2 again. Anything in the 8-meter AoE will get 75% of their armor stripped, but we don't know if the strip can stack with subsequent casts like how Sundering can currently and full strip with enough dashes. This was already a clunky method, so I don't consider it a huge loss. Unairu Wisp will now trigger off anything hit by Caustic Strike and seek out the nearest ally. Unairu Wisp is kind of useless in normal play, since the buffs only apply to Operator. It's annoying to buff more than one teammate in the current iteration since it always seeks the closest ally, and I already explained why it'll be useless in upcoming Eidolons after Focus 3.0. Magnetic Flare and Boost seem to be new nodes and replace the old Magnetic Blast. The new node Flare lasts 30 seconds on cast and disables shields of all enemies entering the area. Honestly, I can only see this being useful against Demoless because normal enemies you would just use Toxin if they have shields. Steel Path Treasurers are an exception because of their 99% damage reduction, but, well, why are you fighting those to start with? I don't know if Demoless can nullify this, but using this plus Vassalok Armor Strip lets you still build for Viral to maximize HP damage instead of Toxin, which isn't as strong even though it bypasses shields. Magnetic Boost just asks you to Void Sling out of a flare zone to refresh its duration and increase its radius by 100%. Plus 100% radius is squaring the area covered, meaning 4 times more area. The duration refresh is kinda useless, but the extra range will really help to keep Demoless guaranteed stripped if it applies to them. In normal gameplay, I would consider these nodes pretty useless. Both of them. Last Gasp is essentially a second wind from Borderlands. If you die as a frame, you can go to Operator and kill enemies before the revive meter drains. Each kill fills the revive by 30%, so you need 4 kills. Pretty useful for normal play if you're learning on Steel Path since it doesn't seem to have charges. And Endurance, limited use and dependent on if Caustic Strike can full strip with multiple casts, otherwise you won't be able to kill anything. So the true potential of Last Gasp depends on that. We don't have info on what Vengeance will do, but I'm assuming it's some kind of damage multiplier or marked target kind of deal. I can't see how it's going to be something game-changing. It's kind of funny because it seems Unairu is all about self-revive and CC utility. The standouts are definitely the innate prime sure-footed and second wind. Sorry, last gasp for self-res. Depending on Caustic Strike's stackable application, this elevates Last Gasp and Magnetic Flare even further, otherwise they fall off in endurance. Reinforced Wind is really cool, and if it applies to being pulled back to frame when frames reach 2 HP while you're an operator, then you will be nearly invincible. A lot of theoreticals, and we will need the final product to actually test, but the school is looking promising. While this means Magnetic Blast Bullet Attractor is leaving, you can still use my Magnetic Blast Unairu builds with Scourge's Alt Fire for the Bullet Attractor effect. Or if that attractor is too small, using Zada's Whisper on the helmet slot, which will stop you from helmeting Roar on, but hey, at least you can proc Zada on the head of the enemy, and redirect everything to epic double-dipping headshots. In theory, Unairu should be able to lock down areas pretty well since it can both remove shields and armor strip a solid amount, so a very good choice for base Steel Path if you want more Operator Warframe hybrid play. In comparison, Madurai was more so a buffing school that doesn't use Operator as much for actual gameplay and more just ability bot usage to activate Void Strike or dash around. For other nodes we lost, Void Spines, the damage redirect is gone. This was a useless node, so no one cares. The Waybounds, Basilisk Gaze, and Scales are obviously replaced and mostly inconsequential. Gaze gave Void Blast Radius, which is now gone, and Scales gave extra armor, whereas the new Stone Skin already gives 200 armor instead of a useless 60 like before. Perhaps the biggest loss was Void Shadow and Chrysalis, which invised allies and reduced damage taken by 80% within range. This was actually really useful for survivability related missions, as well as casual Eidolons. For normal gameplay, Unairu has shifted towards CC and defense removal for a more aggressive playstyle. While we no longer have passive survivability through invis camping and moderate damage reductions, we now have second wind and reinforced return to make up for it. This just means your teammates have to be a bit more careful now. But for yourself, things are still quite comfy. For casual Eidolons, that's just one more nail in the coffin though, why solo meta even for casual will shift towards Madurai instead, since lures can't be hidden and given damage reduction anymore with Unairu. Now, Zenurik is the least changed of them all. The Waybound's Voidflow and Siphon still give Operator energy max and faster regen rate. Energy Pulse still gives extra energy over time when picking up orbs. Energizing Dash is now an Operator ability tied to your 1. Press 1 to create a marked energy regen area. It sticks to allies for 30 seconds when they leave the zone, same as always. Less buggy Void Dash to create a regen area is nice. I don't know about you, but the placement of regen fields from Energizing Dash always seemed to be behind you as clients previously. If you press 1 while you're in it in the new update, you add 20 seconds duration to Wellspring, and now anyone passing through it also gains 20% ability strength. It remains to be seen if this can be stacked with Madurai's Sling strength that gives 40% more strength to the user for 20 seconds after a Void Sling. This can result in team comps where a Hildren on Madurai just stands inside of a Zenurik hardened Wellspring, and Void Slings once every 20 seconds for a bonus total 60% strength. You can easily hit 400% strength this way with a 315 strength build with Growing Power, or 340 strength, and lets you hit a consistent 100% radial full strip with Pillage. I'm not sure if DE thought this through beforehand, but it will be an extremely strong team comp that allows infinite scaling up to level cap now since you only need a Hildren and any other teammate on Zenurik. Hydration and high strength, like how any standard Hildren would be built already. Inner Might is stated in the dev shop to let a free ability be cast without energy once every 60 seconds. While this replaces old Inner Might's 60% heavy attack efficiency on melees, which was commonly used for 12x heavy builds, D has acknowledged after the dev stream this was a mistake and they will retroactively add that effect back in. I don't exactly know if it will just be added as an extra effect on this node, but just know that DE is aware of this issue and are working on it. Disarming Sling has a 50% chance to disarm enemies. This is useless. Killing a disarmed enemy will trigger no quarter and increase operator regen rate by 10% for 10 seconds, with 4 stacks max. This is also useless. Temporal Drag is a change to Temporal Blast. Instead of Void Blasting to slow enemies by 80% for 15 seconds, it's now Pressure 2 for a Radial Blast to slow any enemy caught by 80% for 10 seconds. Yes, there's a duration nerf, but 10 seconds is more than enough, and the Radial is more likely larger than the old Void Blast, and also much easier to pull off since it doesn't require you to get close-ish and aim towards an enemy. Temporal Shot, on the other hand, is a passive that grants both frames and operators 100% headshot damage on anything affected by Temporal Drag. Now, this might just seem like a nifty bonus here for free, but remember the specific interaction of Toxin Lash and Zada's Whisper has with headshot multipliers. it re-dips them a second time. So say you hit a headshot on something with Temporal Drag active, and you're using a weapon with Deadhead Arcane rank 5. Assume the weapon has a base headshot multiplier of 2 times. Temporal Drag will increase this to 3 times, assuming it's additive and not a separate multiplier, and Deadhead will push this to 3.3. Zata's Whisper and Toxin Lash each will square this value when recalculating the extra hit damage, so just letting a headshot alone will increase your damage by 10.89 times. Irrespective of the fact that Zata and Toxin Lash also re-dip Banes again, as well as other multipliers. If you want to take Zenurik into Endurance, this is a top pick for Zata's Whisper or Toxin Lash builds if you're using something that can land headshots. For Demlists, I don't know. In the past, Gloom's slow multiplied the damage reduction Demolishers had to well above 99%. It may no longer be the case, but as Temporal Drag is an ability-based slow, it may cause the same interaction. This will have to be tested once the update drops, but if it doesn't multiply their DR, this is a good alternative to Magus Lockdown on your Operator Arcane loadout if you don't want to use that, such as running Anomaly to group trash mobs and Elevate to deal with chip damage instead. Again, another school with actually quite a lot of promise beyond just haha energy recharge. The bonus ability strength is the real kicker here that opens up new synergies with team comps that also use Madurai, or even solo, letting you hit certain strength breakpoints that your frame build wouldn't have reached otherwise. For example, 200 strength breakpoints for Zaku armor strip builds, or say even Frost, who normally wants a hefty 250% for armor strip. Growing power with Hardened Wellstring would mean you only need to build for 205 strength, which you can reach 204 with Blind Rage, a rank 4 overextended, and Transient Fortitude for a 99.6% armor strip build. And that still lets you build Corrosive for maximum DPS. I really think it will help Frost builds a lot since he's usually super starved for frame mod slots. If you use a kit gun on a full strip Frost build, you can actually even run Pax Bolt for a further 30 strength, which will cut the frame strength requirement of Frost just down to 175, which is a joke to achieve. Naramon is the second last school to look at today. Power Spike is still there for that 5 combo depletion instead of losing everything if the duration runs out. Affinity Spike has been buffed slightly and grants more melee affinity on melee kills. Cool. Mindstep and Sling still make dashes go 30% further, and you move around on foot 30% quicker as Operator. For our new nodes, we have Opening Slam, which grants double combo gain for 20 seconds to your frame when slamming as Operator. This is kind of useless. It's interesting, but realistically speaking, either things are dying so fast you can't and don't need to build combo, or things aren't dying instantly and you have zero issues building combo regardless. It's a nice to have, but in practice it's mostly forgettable. Perhaps its best use will be for Gunblades, which ramp extremely quickly with combo gain mods. But for me, I won't be getting much out of this. I mean, I guess I could slam the Eidolon to build 12x more easily, but yeah, normal gameplay this is not that useful. It would be interesting if it granted a second hit to melee instead of 2 times combo gain. That way we could get some interesting Zata's Whisper or Toxin Lash type of mechanics on any frame, but without the completely broken parts of each ability, like Zata forcing headshots if you procced it there, or Toxin Lash having forced Toxin procs that also redip. Just a raw damage second hit bonus, like Zata, but without the void proc effect would have been cool. Amp Spike is a useless node, for the same reason as Opening Slam I mentioned earlier. Enemies either die easily or are very tanky. There isn't really an in-between. For weapons, this is fine since we can buff them with abilities or mod them more effectively to extreme heights, but amps have neither of this. So they have a mostly fixed power scaling value outside of certain interactions and school-locked buffs. If you try to claymore an enemy that takes a while to kill, Amp Spike is still gonna make them take quite a while to kill. Maybe make it transfer the combo to amps, but quarter effect? So 12x combo gives 3 times more damage for 40 seconds. You may think this is overtuned, but remember it only applies to amps, and you're forced to actually use your frame to build melee combo first. Or maybe have an active ability cast on Operator to consume the 12 times melee combo as well and grant 12 times damage bonus, instead of 3 times for 20 seconds. You could also just make it non-refreshable to make it so you have to time the 40 seconds window properly for normal use. This would also give an alternative school for Eidolons. Honestly, as it is, 100% more damage for 40 seconds is already enough to make Naramon Eidolons viable if you wanted to. Using a Gunblade to build combo, it's essentially a much longer lasting Unairu Wisp, and every time you transference, as long as the combo is above 8x, it will probably refresh with how they currently have it set up. Void Levitation inflicts lifted status on enemies within 6 meters for 4 seconds. This might not sound that useful, but remember the Saxum sets? It only has an explosion cooldown on the chain reaction if it procs on non-lifted enemies. Void Levitation combined with Magus Anomaly actually sounds extremely strong on Quorum. Remember that polearm from New War that was subpar compared to Orthos Prime, Guandao Prime, and Legion, and even more when you consider Rivens. And it had a shit gimmick that didn't scale well outside of Zephyr Tornadoes or a Vobin Full Strip, or say, Saren normal use? Well, maybe this can save it. Anomaly plus Saxum Scent plus Quorum special attack that has high damage and 0 falloff might be enough to make it work here, since you don't need to deal with the buggy Sentient Wrath from Caliban that has a habit of no longer suspending enemies with the lift status after you prime them for some reason. We'll have to wait and see about this one again. A niche setup, but one that in theory would be strong if it works. This is also really important because up until this point in the game, while it may seem like it, such as Titania's Spellbind, there have only been 2 abilities in the game that can give lifted status so far. Sentient Wrath and Sevagoth Shadow's Embrace Pull ability. No other abilities in the game give lifted, even if it seems like it, which really limited Saxum Scent's potential. But now you can do it on any frame with Naramon and you don't have to deal with the bugs of Sentient Wrath, so this opens up more options. The cherry on top? The successor node to Void Levitation is Lethal Levitation, essentially granting 50% bonus damage per any enemy hit by your operator's Void Levitation. It lasts 60 seconds, which is insanely long and irrelevant and ridiculous, but stacks up to 4 times. Quorum doesn't benefit from a condition overload on its special attack, so an extra 200% base damage nearly doubles the explosion damage output. Sling Stun combines Executing Dash and Surging Dash into a single node. While we don't get a massive 12-meter bonus AoE to trigger Energy Restore on hitting enemies anymore, and opening to finishers, 40% more radius is still a lot and essentially doubles your AoE area. The finisher damage buff has been nerfed from 35 to 30%, but that doesn't really matter since you can spam finishers on these enemies over and over again. Most interestingly, it will work beautifully with the Protea Temporal Anchor Nuke build, where you just use a Distreza Prime or Rapier to finisher stab a single enemy and force proc slash for millions of true damage into the nuke power-up. Stab multiple enemies for a world-ending explosion. Using finishers as operator pulls your frame over to do it instead. This pairs perfectly with the unique node and Sling Stun opening enemies up for those sweet stabs. It will proc Killer's Rush, which will grant finishers done this way on Naramon a 50% crit chance buff to all melees, which lasts 40 seconds. It remains to be seen if this works like our old Voidstalker node, which provides up to a 50% flat crits to melee. If Killer's Rush gives flat crit, this is extremely good, and will make stuff like Legion, which is still good but was gutted by the Blood Rush nerf, shine again. Voidstalker was incredibly expensive to use on operator energy and was annoying on how it forced you to hide in void mode in normal gameplay to get the crit buffs, and then it even decays over time and more quickly the larger the buff was, so Killer's Rush is a massive improvement. For nodes we've lost, Void Hunter is no more. It was basically wall hacks and was useless. Disorienting Blast was basically just small AoE rad procs at 50% chance for 60 seconds. Also a trash node, so I'm glad this is gone. Disarming Blast now exists as Disarming Sling on Zenurik instead. Regardless in any form, this is a useless node, so it's good it's gone from Naramon. The new Naramon seems fairly balanced. Not overtuned like Madurai, but not underwhelming either. We still have some useless nodes in the form of Opening Slam and Amp Spike in their current state of the update unless they get buffed, while also doubling as a better Unairu Wisp for Eidolons. We still have Power Spike and Affinity Spike for the reasons we loved Naramon. The waybounds are unchanged, but now we get lifted status synergies in builds that want to take advantage of the Saxum set, with the standout definitely being Quorum. And this is only our third source of lifted status in the game without resorting to melee stances, and it can be used on any frame. Killer's Rush will be a huge boon to melee struggling on crit if it's flat crit and is way easier to use than our old Voidstalker. Basically, Naramon seems very in-depth with frame synergies with a lot of options and favors melee gameplay even more heavily now. While it doesn't have as obvious synergies like Madurai, haha extra damage, and ability strength, more general things like Ruck crit chance and lifted status opens doors to builds you would never use before. Our last school today is Vazarin. Mending Unity still gives 25-meter bonus affinity range, topping us out at 75. Mending Soul has been buffed slightly to add 100% faster revive so that even after you run out of instant reses, it still has a use, especially in Endurance. Enduring Tides is unchanged and still grants 200% operator health max. Rejuvenating Tides is just changed to double the 6 HP per second to operator heal while you're in Warframe. Void regen has been tweaked from 25 HP per second to 10 HP per second, increasing by an additional 10 HP for each second in Void mode, up to 50 HP per second. Overall, this change is honestly irrelevant because it takes 4 seconds for the new regen to heal 100 HP, where the old one would also heal 100 HP after 4 seconds. Below 4 seconds, the new one heals less, but healing less than 100 HP in general is useless. And having to stay in Void mode for over 4 seconds for the new focus node to pull ahead is also brain dead gameplay. It's more so just a bonus node nice to have rather than something important. If you really want to heal your operator, there are always large health pads, which gives 300 health per pulse. Squad regen makes Void regen apply to allies within the 75 meter affinity radius once you're at max regen stacks, which takes 5 seconds. Another nice to have and useful, but I don't really see where this will matter unless DE introduces some special operator only mode. Maybe in Void Cascade this will be a bit handy when in the transference zones. But again, we already have Void mode and energy pads and stuff like Magus Lockdown to CC. You can also already give operators shield gate by using shield pads, so I don't consider this node super important. Void Snare is a very overly complicated ability. I don't ever see the point of using this. We have Magus Repair and Magus Elevate, which only require Transference or Void mode to proc. Why would we have to set up a trap, get enemies stuck in it, and also Void Slings through it to grant allies just 100 HP? Keep in mind, squad regen will heal 100 health in 2 seconds already to any allies in affinity radius. Protective Sling is copy-pasted Protective Dash. I don't think anything has changed here. Guardian Shell has been changed to work like Iron Skin now. Pressing 1 also now casts on all allies in affinity range and not just you. So instead of draining energy for energy absorbed, it has its own HP pool, and the first 4 seconds it's cast, any incoming damage will add to that total pool. It also means no more bugged Void Blast, since this node previously reduced the Void Blast radius on Vazarin to just 1.5 meters. This makes Guardian Shell actually viable now, and a massive buff, because before, against any higher leveled enemy, getting shot would instantly drain all your energy, and it also only worked on you instead of all allies within infinity range. Now, Guardian Break is the ace in the hole. I don't think people realize. It's a massive buff to shield gaining mechanics and makes Vazarin even comfier to play now in Endurance. It increases shield regen rate by 150%, which I don't care about, and decreases regen delay by 90% for 8 seconds, which is the golden ticket. This is important because the full shield gate window is 1.3 seconds. A 90% reduced delay before shields start regenning means your shields will start regenning before the iframes end. A partial shield gate window lasts 0.33 seconds. Normally, shields take 4 seconds before they start regenerating if they're fully depleted. With Guardian Break, it will only take 0.4 seconds before it starts back up. So you'll be near invincible for 8 seconds, even after the iframes from Protective Dash ends, since even if your shields break again before it refills, there will only be a 0.07 seconds window where you will have no shields, and also shield gate being depleted. In particular, Gauss is completely invincible with a new Vazarin for the full 8 seconds, because his passive is the only way in the game to grant yourself reduced shield recharge delay. He gains up to 80% depending on how full his battery is, but combined with Guardian Break, it will push his recharge delay below 0.33 seconds, meaning his shields will always start regenerating before his health can be hit, regardless of if it was a shield depleted from full for 1.3 seconds shield gate, or a partial shield that was depleted for only 0.33 seconds shield gate. So this means 5 seconds to complete invulnerability due to iframes of Protective Sling, then a further 8 seconds of infinite shield gate because of Guardian Break, for a total of 13 seconds. Essentially, you only have to Vazarin dash once every 13 seconds now instead of every 5, and you will still be able to shield gate quite well even without Brief Respite or Augur mods, which opens up more mod slots again, with Gauss being the standout of being completely invincible outside of toxin damage in the entire 13-second window. For nodes Vazarin has lost, really just Guardian Blast. While Vazarin hasn't had much things change on the surface, it's much more comfortable to use now, and I don't think people realize how powerful Guardian Break is now. It gives you near complete invincibility unless they change the numbers on it. Guardian Shell is now upgraded into a proper iron skin and not a shitty high energy drain shield channel. It was also bugged and did not protect against beam attacks either previously. Sonic Dash is gone, which is used to not yeet enemies and instead open them up to finishers similar to Naramon. This was never really characteristic of Vazarin and was reusing the executing dash code from Naramon, so I won't miss it. Besides, we still have Zakti if you for some reason want force finishers on a Vazarin setup without using Naramon. We also lost Void Aegis, but that thing is equally as shit as our current Void Shell in our Focus 2.0 and doesn't do anything that matters. It requires you to be in Void mode, where you're already invincible to start with, and generally the only reason you'd be standing in Void mode in one spot is to revive teammates, which means they're already down and invincible regardless. Yes, you could block gunfire and doors with it, but explosions would still pass right through, so there are better ways to do so with abilities and weapons already. And there we go, Focus 3.0 and the full potential of it. Keep in mind, overall focus costs are rumored to go up, with each school costing 20 million focus to max now. I don't know if that's true, but that's what I heard. So this means you now need 100 million focus to max all schools, if true. Right now it only takes about 52.6 million focus to unlock all schools and max out the focus pool. So you'll probably want to farm more focus as you can in the meantime if you haven't reached that 100 million focus yet. But take this with a grain of salt as, well, rumors, and we're looking at dev shop material too. Now, D has confirmed that focus spent in schools will be refunded as school-specific focus for you to spend again, and focus pool will be refunded as Radiant Eidolon shards since the pool is getting completely removed. I don't know if it'll be rounded up or down, but this will let you decide which schools to spend the refunded Eidolon shards on. I don't know if you will still need Brilliant Eidolon shards to unlock the final rank of Waybounds, but you probably will. These are my thoughts on the new Focus 3.0 system and possible synergies and builds moving forward with it. What did you think? Did anything here surprise you? Which schools were you looking most forward to? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. If this is your first time watching, feel free to leave a like, or better yet, subscribe. 79.5% of you are not subscribed. I'm trying my best to get you new information out always as soon as possible, like I've done with covering the new augments, Garuda's rework, upcoming Angels of Zariman, and the Focus rework. Stick around if you want to see interesting memes and builds on a nearly daily basis. You won't miss out on any of that, do you? That'll be it for this video. Thank you all for watching, and see you all next time.
And if you hold, you go, you know, you get your distances and you can change them, you can change your orientation, and you can kind of ninja around, and then you can switch right to your Warframe via melee.